Hello there and welcome into a new hour here on Fox Weather. You're joining us on Weather Command. I'm Marissa Torres.
And I'm Haley Meyer. It's Wednesday, September 3rd, which is typically when we get that G-named storm. Fox Weather is your Hurricane HQ, and today we are exactly 1 week away also from the statistical peak of the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season.
Yep, September 10th, that magical peak date. And with the forecast over the next 7 days coming further into focus, it is likely we're going to have a tropical cyclone to monitor. That G-named storm, almost right on cue, right? We do already have that area to watch in the eastern Atlantic with the National Hurricane Center giving it, there it is. Had to look for it for a second. This is the Atlantic Basin over here. So the NHC has given it a high chance of development in the coming week.
Well, the Eastern Pacific is also incredibly active. We have Kiko and Lorena, both of which could be impacting the United States, one into Hawaii, the other for portions of the desert Southwest. And we'll get into these storms in just a few minutes. But first, let's bring in Fox Weather hurricane specialist Bryan Norcross. Bryan, we've got our eyes on this system that's very likely to become Gabrielle. I think that's the biggest change in the last 3 days with the model consensus. They're all in on this. But we've got time before any potential impacts for the Caribbean or to the U.S. What is the time span for this, the long range? Do you sense any trends on if this is more Caribbean or if it could follow a similar path to, let's say, Erin and Fernan?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Haley. It's a very complicated situation because one of my rules of forecasting is storms that are slow moving, just developing, or disorganized are always subject to big errors in their forecast and subject to change. And this one fits every category. So nothing is moving quickly. You can see on the satellite there, this is the disturbance, this thing here, and it's all wrapped up with a bunch of other thunderstorms around, and it's got to break free of that. And there's more complications out there. Look at the Saharan dust and how close that is. So it's going to have to, if that thing, there's where the National Hurricane Center centers it, but it's kind of a broad thing. If that's going to break free, it's got to get past that dust there, and it's just going to take a while for that to happen. And things aren't moving quickly here. So this is not like earlier in the year when things were zooming along at 20, 23 miles per hour. Now they're moving maybe 10 miles per hour. So this is going to creep and crawl with the dust, with these other complications out there. I mentioned all those thunderstorms around. That's called the intertropical convergence zone. It's always there, this line of thunderstorms. You see these clusters of thunderstorms all along here. Well, they're kind of stealing some of the thunder from the disturbance here, because if you think about it, to make a thunderstorm, the air has to rise, has to pull in air around it, and that just disrupts the circulation. So this thing here has to break free of this general line of disturbed weather here, and that's going to be a slow process. So everything about this thing is going to be slow, and that means we got to expect the forecast to change. So there is really low certainty exactly when this is going to play out. The thinking is that as it moves over here toward the islands, it will have a good opportunity to become at least a tropical depression, but that's a really low bar. It really just means it's going to break free enough from the dust and from the intertropical convergence zone thunderstorms to get a circulation. So that's what we're going to watch for. So there's the development area. That's why it's huge over the next week. The Hurricane Center is saying 70% chance of it becoming at least a depression. This is not 70% chance of it becoming Gabrielle, by the way, but if it can find some conducive atmosphere, and the chances are decent that it eventually will, it would become Gabrielle, as you say, the G storm more or less right on time. Now, take a look at the model, and we're going to talk about these various factors. And remember, the dry air is a big one, and upper level winds can push dry air into the circulation. So what you're going to see here is where we start here. There's the circulation. You see it there as a kind of broad circulation right there. Plenty of moisture right there, but all super dry air to the north. This is the Saharan air layer up here, and obviously that's going to be an influence. It's got to push that away. Now watch as we go forward in time. Here's the day. So there we are today, September 3rd. All right, now forward we go. And over the next week, watch as this thing goes along here. Look at the dry air pushing in on it, and look at it accelerating, so that here we are now. We're all the way up to September 11th, and we have have some moisture. We actually have a decently developed, probably tropical depression, maybe low-end tropical storm, but it's surrounded by dry air there. And you notice it kind of evolved as it went. It started speeding up as it went. That's the expectation. The steering currents will pick up. So right now, the expectation is that somewhere in here, it will find a patch of atmosphere that will allow it to get together. Now, you might say, oh, does this mean it's going to hit the islands? No, not at all, because the strength of it and the direction it moves, the track, are all interrelated. If it gets stronger sooner, it's likely to turn north. If it stays weak like this, it's likely to go farther west. So this is just a scenario, that's all. We can look at the variety of scenarios. This is an exclusive product that we make at Fox Weather. And notice this is up through a week from now. And it takes the European model, the GFS, and the Google AI DeepMind model and combines them to say, okay, looking at the consensus, where might this storm go? And look, all of the possibilities here are pretty low odds. So even the greatest possibility of development is back in here, and that's only 30%. And then the 20% range extends here, and then we're up in the 10s up in here. So what you notice is there are these shoots up. Look, there's one up here of a possibility. There's another one up here of a possibility. These are the chances of it going north because it gets stronger sooner. So we're going to, keep an open mind here because we've got a lot of time. But if it goes over here, it's more likely to be weaker. That's about all we can say right now. Likelihoods and so forth. And all the odds are obviously pretty low. There's a big dip in the jet stream over here. So if it comes along here and gets strong, then it's going to go zoom out to sea. But if it stays weak and gets down in here, then we're going to see. We don't know because this could move out. And then if it gets up in here slowly, then there's a lot of different possibilities. So that's where we are in Atlantic right now. It's all possibilities, but nothing is happening quickly.
Yeah, it's a lot of hurry up and wait whenever we see these things start to blossom out of the far eastern Atlantic. And before we move on to the Pacific Basin, one of the things of note, Bryan, has been the continuation of this stalled boundary over Florida. We've continued to see these fronts get really hung up on the Florida Peninsula. And as you know, this time of year, anything could be possible with lows spinning up. And we have, in fact, seen several lows spin up along that boundary. But in terms of tropical development, for right now, seems to be held at bay.
Yeah, because this big dip in the jet stream here is going to make really hostile upper level winds. We may very well get something like a nor'easter up in here, but it wouldn't be tropical based on what we know right now. These are just low pressure systems associated with that front along there based on everything we can see right now.
If nothing else, very heavy rain that's been hanging out over South Florida. Okay, the Pacific. Let's talk about that, Bryan, because as of this morning, we now have Hurricane Lorena, and then we're also still watching Hurricane Kiko much further off, not too far off from entering the Central Pacific. Wherever you want to start. I know Lorena, of course, though, we're expected to see even some of that moisture into the southwest potentially.
Yeah, so this is going to be a potential monsoon situation in the southwest, but there it is. There's Lorena. Let's look at it close up. It's not far from Cabo San Lucas. It is offshore. They're feeling kind of outer bands there now. There you see it's a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane. Here's the deal, is off of Baja California Sur here, the water's very cool. That's what the green means there, in the 70s. So the storm is forecast to weaken significantly as it moves to the north, moves into Baja as a much weaker storm. That's the thinking right now. Fringe effects here in the tip of the Baja California Sur Peninsula. All right, off to Kiko. Kiko is heading in the general direction of Hawaii. It's a small, tiny little storm, 105-mile-an-hour winds. But here's the deal with that one. Look at this. It's going to run over the cooler water before it gets to Hawaii as well. So 85 miles per hour, that's 5 days from now. Maybe a moisture surge through the islands, but no significant impact is the thought right now. But we'll continue to watch that just in case, because this, this is the direction. When storms come from this direction, unless we have a weird situation like we did a few years ago, where this warm water was all way up here, then we don't normally get storms from this direction in Hawaii. In order to get a hurricane in Hawaii, usually you have to come down through here and then suddenly kind of turn north, something like that, to get a significant hurricane here in the Hawaiian Islands. But you know, it may disrupt it in the sense that moisture flows in once it goes on by, and that's going to happen sometime later on next week.
And Bryan, I mean, I think when I look at the EPAC and the Atlantic, there can be some parallels drawn. You know, sometimes when the Eastern Pacific gets off to the races with activity, give it a week, 2 weeks time, and then that energy starts to flow into the Atlantic. Do you think that having these two hurricanes in the EPAC could be an early sign that, hey, mid-September could be a little more formidable in terms of the tropical waves, or potentially something a little closer to home for the Atlantic hurricane season?
Yeah, that's a great question, Haley. And yes, I think the answer is yes. We've been talking about the west to east moving and pulse that moves around the atmosphere called the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and other kind of disturbances that suppress activity and enhance activity. Normally, we see it Central Pacific, Eastern Pacific, and then Atlantic a week or two later. That is the expectation that beginning middle of next week into the middle of the month, we'll start to see this generally more conducive atmosphere over the Atlantic, and we would expect more activity for the second half of September based on what we know now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when it comes to the Gulf of America, too, some early signs that we could have some of that development. What is your take potentially on us having to really be on guard, let's say, in 7 to 10 days' time? Because you have less lead time as compared to, let's say, a tropical wave.
Yeah, so there are some indications in the long-range computer models of some disturbance moving from south to north in the Gulf. They're very low odds at this point. It's not obvious what triggers that. It's probably some weak disturbance that's moving across, has moved across the Atlantic and the Caribbean. But as we get especially later into September, like we have seen in the past, like we saw with Helene last year, coming out of a disturbance related to Central America and then moving north, that's when we'll start to look there. So those are long-range models looking out a couple weeks. So it may be an indication of that season beginning. It begins the end of September to around October 1st on average, but nothing definitive right now.
Yeah, and nothing too out of the ordinary. We're going to have meteorologist Bean Frony joining us later in the hour, talking about those notorious I-name storms that we've seen in the month of September that have been very powerful, even after a quiet start to the season. So always appreciate your insight. Fox Weather Hurricane Specialist Bryan Norcross. Thanks, Bryan.